His wife dumped him and their autistic son for being poor, until their son built a $30 million app. Then she showed up with a lawyer demanding full custody. What unfolded in court made her scream. "I'm too young to waste my life caring for a special needs child. You're poor. Both of you are dead weight I have to shed off to progress in life. He's yours now. Don't ever contact me again." Those were the last words Vanessa Hayes wrote before vanishing without a backward glance, leaving her 7-year-old autistic son and her struggling husband behind like they were nothing more than obstacles in her way. She had no idea that the same autistic child she called a burden would become a prodigy at 14, creating groundbreaking software and controlling millions. And what happened next? When she returned 7 years later demanding full custody of the child she once threw away, will challenge everything you think you know about love, loyalty, parenthood, and justice. Viewers, have you ever had someone you loved discard you like you were nothing, only to come back the moment life started blessing you? How do you handle that? Samuel Hayes turned the key in the front door with the slow, tired motion of a man who had spent the day under the hood of one car after another. His clothes smelled faintly of engine oil and warm metal, and his hands were still stained from the last brake job he finished just before closing the shop. All he wanted was to step inside, hear Vanessa humming softly from the kitchen, Noah playing with toys, and let the long day settle behind him. The door opened easily, but the silence inside felt unusual. Their home was never loud, but it always carried a gentle rhythm. Noah pacing with his little camera, the refrigerator humming, the rustle of crayons on paper, or the clicking sound Noah made with his tongue when he concentrated. Tonight the air felt different, still in a way that made Samuel pause before closing the door. He stepped inside and glanced automatically toward the living room. Everything looked the same at first glance, until he noticed a strange gap where two chairs usually stood. He blinked and took a slow step forward, wondering if Noah had pushed them out of place. But as he looked around, he saw other small absences. The throw blanket that always stayed on the recliner was missing. The tall lamp near the hallway was gone. A framed photo from their wedding was missing from the wall, leaving a small square of clean paint behind. Samuel's shoulders tightened. He rubbed the back of his neck, telling himself to breathe. Maybe she had rearranged things again, but as he moved farther into the living room, the truth seeped in, steady and heavy, like cold water spreading across a floor. Something was wrong. The television was still sitting on the stand, but the decorative vase Vanessa loved was gone. The books she always stacked on the bottom shelf were missing, leaving behind thin lines of dust. The house hadn't been robbed. Nothing expensive was taken, only the things that belonged to her. Samuel set his tool bag down slowly and called out in a cautious voice meant not to startle his son. "Noah! Buddy, where are you?" A soft tapping answered him from down the hall, a familiar sound that eased only the smallest fraction of his worry. Noah often tapped the side of his camera when he was nervous or working through sensory overload. Samuel followed the sound until he reached the bedroom doorway, and what he saw inside sent a cold feeling through his chest. The wardrobe door on the right side, the side Vanessa always used, was wide open, and the section where her clothes had been folded and hung was completely empty. Her dresses were gone, her coats were gone, her shoes were gone. The entire right half of the closet looked like it had been cleared in one rush sweep. Noah stood near the foot of the bed, his little camera pressed against his chest, his eyes wide and unblinking. He wasn't crying, but his breathing was too quick, the way it got whenever something in his world shifted too suddenly. Samuel approached slowly and placed a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "Hey," he whispered softly. "It's okay. Daddy's here." Noah didn't speak. He lifted the camera and showed Samuel the little screen. The screen displayed a frozen image of Vanessa dragging a suitcase across the floor. Samuel's heart thudded painfully, and he took the camera carefully from Noah's hands. He didn't hit play. The still image already told him enough. His gaze shifted to the dresser. On top of it, placed neatly in the center as if someone wanted to make sure it would be found, was a single folded piece of paper. Samuel's mouth went dry. He moved toward it with slow, heavy steps, aware of Noah watching him intently. He unfolded the paper, and his eyes began moving across the words. each sentence sharper than the last, written in Vanessa's hurried handwriting, and his world tilted. I can't do this anymore. I'm too young to waste my life caring for a special needs child. You are poor and going nowhere. He's autistic. Both of you are dead weight. He's yours now. Don't contact me. Ever. By the time he finished reading, Samuel felt as if the floor had tilted under him. His vision blurred for a second, and he had to blink hard to steady his breath. The words were harsh, cold, and final. She was gone. She wasn't coming back. She wanted nothing to do with them. She had left their lives behind without hesitation, without a conversation, without even a goodbye. Samuel lowered the note and lifted his gaze to Noah, who was still standing where he'd been, staring at him with an expression too old for his young face. Samuel forced himself to move toward him and knelt on the carpet. He pulled Noah gently into his arms, holding him with more strength than he intended, because he needed the grounding just as much as Noah did. Noah softened against him, his breathing slowing as Samuel held him. Samuel pressed his cheek against the top of Noah's head, taking in the warm, familiar scent of his son's hair, and he closed his eyes. For a long moment they stayed like that in the half-empty room, the air thick with the sharp sting of abandonment and the quiet strength of a father who knew he couldn't fall apart. Not tonight. Not ever. Eventually, Samuel whispered into Noah's hair, his voice steady but filled with a promise he felt anchor itself into his bones. We'll be okay. I'm right here. I'm not leaving. The house felt different now, lighter in some places, heavier in others. But as Samuel carried Noah out of the room and into the soft glow of the living room lamp, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. It was just the two of them now, and he would make sure that was enough. The next morning arrived with the slow gray light of early winter, stretching across the living room floor, like a quiet reminder that life didn't pause just because someone walked away. Samuel woke on the couch with a stiff neck and a heavy mind. He hadn't meant to fall asleep there, but after spending half the night making sure Noah finally settled, he didn't have the strength to move. Noah had curled himself at the far end of the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, his camera resting beside him like a loyal guardian. His breathing was soft and steady now, a small comfort in the storm that had settled inside the house. Samuel rose carefully so he wouldn't disturb him. His body protested with every movement, especially his shoulders and lower back, worn from years of lifting engines and working in cramped spaces under cars. He rubbed his eyes, trying to gather his scattered thoughts. He needed a plan, something solid to hold on to, something that would keep them steady while the dust settled. But every time he tried to think clearly, Vanessa's note flashed in his mind. He pushed the thought away, walked quietly into the kitchen, and began preparing breakfast, hoping the familiar routine would help Noah feel grounded. He cracked eggs into a bowl, whisked them as softly as possible, and toasted bread while the pan heated. The small sounds began to fill the house. The gentle clatter of utensils, the pop of the toaster, the faint sizzle of eggs hitting butter. They gave the home a sense of normalcy that Samuel desperately needed. When the smell reached the living room, Noah stirred. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the morning light. He didn't speak, but he sat up, wrapped his blanket around himself like a cocoon, and watched Samuel from a distance. "Morning, buddy," Samuel said with a gentle smile, trying to hide the tiredness in his voice. "Breakfast is almost ready." Noah blinked once, a quiet acknowledgement, and then began tapping lightly on the frame of his camera, a rhythmic sound that told Samuel his son was trying to regulate himself after the emotional overload of the night before. They ate together in silence, not an uncomfortable silence, but the kind that grows from two people who rely on each other more than they rely on words. Noah ate slowly, pausing now and then to stare at the table, his mind drifting somewhere Samuel couldn't reach. Samuel wished he could know exactly what his son was thinking, but he had learned over the years that sometimes the best way to understand Noah was simply to be there, steady and present. After breakfast, Samuel helped Noah prepare for school. He made sure the backpack was packed with everything Noah needed: headphones, a stress ball, a small notebook, and the little camera he never went anywhere without. The camera, scratched on the corners and held together with a piece of black tape, was more than a device for Noah. It was a part of him, a tool that helped him process the world. When they stepped outside, The chilly air hit them both with a sharp bite. Samuel helped Noah into the passenger seat of the old sedan, a car held together mostly by patience and the long hours Samuel spent maintaining it. He buckled Noah in carefully, handing him the camera, and then slid behind the wheel. The drive to school was quiet. Noah stared out the window, watching buildings pass by with the steady focus of someone who was trying to make sense of a world that changed too fast. Samuel gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, trying to keep his emotions contained. He knew he had to stay strong for Noah, but the silence in the house, the empty closet, and the cruel words on the note had carved deep marks into his thoughts. When they reached the school, Samuel parked and turned toward Noah. "I'll be right here at 3, he said softly. "Same as always." Noah blinked twice again, a small signal of understanding. He opened the door slowly, careful with his steps, and walked toward the entrance with the guarded posture of a child who needed predictable routines to feel safe. Samuel watched until the doors closed behind him, and only then allowed himself to breathe deeply. He turned the car around and drove straight toward the workshop, letting the familiar sight of rusted cars and grease-stained pavement guide him back into a world he understood. The mechanic shop sat on the edge of town, a long, low building with a rolling door that always stuck halfway when lifted. As Samuel pulled into the lot, he saw the owner, Mike Turner, standing outside with a cup of coffee in hand. Mike was a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with a thick beard and a voice that carried across the entire workshop when he wanted it to. "You're early," Mike called out as Samuel stepped out of the car. "Couldn't stay home," Samuel replied, keeping his voice light. Mike studied him for a long moment, his eyes dropping to the lingering grease stains on Samuel's clothes from the day before, and then to the faint exhaustion lining his face. "Everything all right?" Samuel hesitated. "Just a long night." Mike nodded slowly, not pushing. "Well, we got work to keep you busy. The Johnson transmission's acting up again, and there's a truck in bay too that needs a full brake job. Think you can manage?" "Yeah," Samuel said, relieved to have something tangible to focus on. "I got it." Inside the workshop, the air smelled of motor oil, metal, and hot rubber, a smell that had become strangely comforting over the years. Samuel slipped into his routine easily. He changed into his work shirt, tied an old bandana around his head to keep sweat away, and grabbed his tools. The day unfolded in steady rhythms, lifting hoods, tightening bolts, checking fluid levels, diagnosing strange rattles. Physical work grounded him in a way thoughts never could. Every car demanded focus, and focus kept him from replaying every word on Vanessa's note. At one point, while tightening a loose belt, he caught Mike watching him through the glass office window. When their eyes met, Mike raised his coffee in a silent offer of support. Samuel managed a small nod back before returning to the engine in front of him. He worked through the morning and afternoon without stopping, letting the clang of tools and the growl of engines drown out the ache inside him. For those hours, he wasn't the man whose wife had left without warning. He wasn't the man raising an autistic son alone. He wasn't the man trying to figure out how to rebuild a home that suddenly felt half empty. When 3 o'clock drew near, Samuel left to pick him up, arriving early. He waited in the car, staring at the school entrance. And when Noah finally walked out, Samuel felt the tightness in his chest loosen just a little. They drove home, shared a simple dinner, and Samuel helped Noah get ready for bed. When Noah finally fell asleep, curled up with his blanket and his camera beside him on the pillow, Samuel stood in the doorway for a long moment. He knew this was the beginning of something neither of them had chosen. But he also knew something else. He would not fail his son. Not now. Not ever. And with that silent promise, Samuel turned off the light. Years passed with the steady, predictable rhythm of a life built on effort, sacrifice, and quiet resilience. Samuel worked at the same workshop, fixing engines and transmissions with hands that had grown stronger and more scarred. Noah grew taller, his curls thicker, his gaze sharper. He still carried his camera everywhere, documenting the world in a way Samuel never quite understood, but he trusted his son's instinct without question. By the time Noah turned 12, their small house, once filled with the heavy silence of abandonment, had reshaped itself into a home built on two people learning to understand each other's worlds. Conversations between them were often brief, but meaningful. And every evening, Samuel sat beside him while Noah typed lines of code with terrifying speed and precision, the screen lighting up his calm, focused face. Samuel didn't understand most of the code, but he understood the way Noah relaxed when working on it, so he encouraged him. "Is it helping?" Samuel would ask. Noah would nod, tapping the edge of his camera once. By 14, Noah had built something far more complex than anything Samuel could have imagined. His software, communication system that adapted to speech patterns, gestures, and sensory preferences, was tested quietly with the help of Noah's therapist, who was blown away by the results. Children who barely spoke formed sentences. Teens who struggled to communicate used it to express emotions. Parents cried. Samuel watched from the side, chest warm with pride. Unsure how his son had gone from the quiet boy filming empty spaces in the house to a young teenager creating something revolutionary. The turning point came on a warm spring afternoon. Samuel was under a car at the workshop when his phone rang. It was Noah's therapist, Dr. Keller, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Hayes, you need to get here. Now." He arrived at the center to find reporters gathered outside, microphones raised, cameras flashing. A major tech company had discovered Noah's software. They wanted to license it, develop it, expand it. Inside, Noah sat calmly on a chair, the CEO of the tech company leaning forward with wide eyes. "You built this?" the man asked, as if he couldn't believe the quiet 14-year-old in front of him. Noah simply tapped the camera once. Samuel stepped forward. "He did." The CEO turned toward Samuel. "This is groundbreaking. We want to acquire the rights, hire support engineers, and let your son continue leading development. We're offering $30 million. The news broke across national channels within hours. 14-year-old engineer revolutionizes communication for autistic individuals. Teen prodigy sells software for $30 million. Samuel made Noah's favorite dinner that night. Noah ate quietly, his camera beside him. When Noah finally turned off the computer and walked toward him, he stopped with the same calm steadiness Samuel always admired. "Are you okay?" Samuel asked. Noah tapped the camera once. Samuel smiled. "Me too." For the first time in years, he allowed himself to breathe freely. But someone else had seen the news. Someone who had walked away when Noah was 7. The sunset was soft that evening, spilling warm gold across the living room floor where Noah sat hunched over his laptop, headphones resting loosely around his neck. The light caught the faint curve of concentration in his brow as he typed, the familiar tap of his camera beside him, creating a quiet rhythm in the room. Samuel watched him from the kitchen doorway for a moment, feeling a rare sense of calm settle in his chest. Things had finally begun to feel steady. Then came the knock. 3 firm, slow knocks, controlled, professional, and heavy enough to still the air inside the house. Samuel wiped his hands on a dish towel and walked toward the door with a sinking feeling spreading through his stomach. When he opened it, the cold evening wind brushed past him, but the real chill came from the 2 figures standing on the porch. Vanessa stood in front, looking polished, expensive, and impossibly put together. Her coat was the kind people wore in glossy magazine ads, cinched at the waist with gold buckles. Her eyes moved over Samuel with a look that was strangely confident, as if the last 12 years had never happened. Beside her stood a sharply dressed man holding a large manila envelope in one hand and a leather briefcase in the other. He didn't smile. He introduced himself as her attorney. He brought out a manila envelope and gave it to him. "We need your response within 3 days," the man said, his voice clipped and professional. "Otherwise, we meet in court." Samuel didn't take the envelope immediately. His eyes shifted to Vanessa, trying to find even a flicker of remorse or hesitation. "You walked away," he said quietly. Vanessa lifted her chin. "I want my son." Before Samuel could speak, Noah stepped into the hallway, drawn by the unfamiliar voices. At 14, he stood tall, lean, and composed. But the moment he saw Vanessa, his entire posture stiffened. His hand tightened around his camera until his knuckles paled. Vanessa's smile softened unnaturally, practiced like stage lighting. "Noah, sweetheart, it's Mom." Noah didn't move. He didn't blink. His breathing changed the way it always did when something inside him shifted too quickly. Samuel stepped closer, placing a subtle barrier between them. The lawyer repeated in a firm tone, 3 days. Then they turned and walked away, Vanessa with deliberate grace, the lawyer with quiet finality, leaving the envelope heavy in Samuel's hand, and the air colder than the wind outside. He closed the door gently. Noah watched him with steady, unblinking eyes. Samuel swallowed hard. Let's see what this is. They walked to the kitchen table and sat side by side in the dim light. The envelope felt heavier than paper should ever feel. Samuel broke the seal and pulled out the stack of documents, his hands already shaking before he turned to the first page. The words hit hard. Petition for full custody of minor Noah Hayes and legal control over his intellectual property and earnings. Vanessa claimed she had maintained emotional involvement, claimed Samuel alienated her, claimed she supported Noah from a distance, claimed she deserved her parental role restored, claimed she was entitled to participate in decisions regarding his company and earnings. Samuel's jaw tightened. Beside him, Noah read each line slowly, carefully, his eyes narrowing with a clear understanding of what she wanted. When he reached the last paragraph, he lifted his gaze to Samuel. Dad, he said softly, tapping his camera once, don't worry. Samuel's breath shook as he exhaled. Noah rarely used words, and when he did, they carried weight. That single sentence steadied him more than anything else could have. We're going to fix this, Samuel said. The next morning, they sat in their lawyer's quiet office. Mr. Rhodes scanned the documents page by page, his brow tightening slightly but his expression calm. The room was silent except for the faint turning of paper. As Samuel watched Rhodes read, his mind began to drift, slowly at first, then completely, pulled into the memories he kept locked away for years. He saw himself 12 years younger, standing in a small, cold courthouse. His hands trembled as he held the temporary custody form. Noah, only 7 years old, clinging to the leg of his jeans. The judge asked simple questions with a firm voice, and Samuel answered with his entire heart in his throat. He saw the stamped approval. Temporary custody granted. Reason, abandonment. He remembered walking out into the winter air afterward, Noah wrapped in a blanket, quiet but safe in his arms. 2 years later, he saw himself again, older, more tired, standing in front of that same judge. Vanessa had never responded to a single notice, not one. The judge reviewed the absence, the record, the history. Full custody granted. Divorce finalized by default. He remembered carrying Noah out of the courtroom afterward, holding his small hand in his own, whispering silently that he would protect him from everything, even the people who should have loved him. The memory dissolved and Samuel blinked back into the present. Rhodes was closing the folder. Send me every document you've ever kept, the lawyer said calmly. Every appointment, every school meeting, every therapy session, every record. We'll build this case properly. Also, don't forget the custody document. Samuel nodded slowly. I kept everything. Rhodes smiled faintly. Good. Then she doesn't stand a chance. Noah tapped his camera again, twice this time, as if sealing a promise only he understood. Samuel looked at his son, feeling something fierce and unbreakable rise inside him. They had already survived the worst part. This time, they weren't fighting alone. The courtroom was colder than Samuel expected, the kind of cold that slipped into a man's bones and made even breathing feel too loud. The benches were already half filled, strangers watching with curiosity as Samuel walked in with Noah beside him. Noah held his small camera close, tapping lightly on the corner with steady fingers, his way of staying grounded. 14 years old, but moving with a calmness that made Samuel wonder how much strength his son had carried all along. Vanessa sat at the petitioner's table, back straight, lips pressed together, dressed like someone attending a business meeting instead of a custody hearing. Her attorney, Franklin, leaned in close to whisper something to her, and she nodded confidently, never once looking at Samuel with the eyes of a mother. Rhodes placed a reassuring hand on Samuel's shoulder before they took their seats. We're prepared, he whispered. Everything is ironclad. When the bailiff called, all rise, the room stood as Judge Miriam Dalton entered. Her expression was firm, unreadable, the kind of judge who didn't bend for theatrics. After everyone sat, she glanced over her glasses. Petitioner You may proceed. Franklin stood, confidence dripping from every step he took toward the lectern. Your Honor, my client seeks to restore her rightful place in her son's life. She has been emotionally involved from afar, but Mr. Hayes, evidence counselor, the judge interrupted, not storytelling. Franklin swallowed, flipping open his folder. We have statements from my client attesting to years of attempted involvement. She was pushed out, isolated. He placed a few sheets on the clerk's desk. Exhibit A. The clerk collected them, stamped them, and handed them to the judge's assistant for review. Franklin continued, Your Honor, Mrs. Hayes is fully prepared to provide the structure, resources, and guidance her son needs, especially now given his extraordinary potential and the financial opportunities. Rhodes rose immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This confirms financial motive. The judge raised her hand. Sustained. Franklin stiffened. I retract the phrasing. Continue, and the judge said. Franklin straightened his papers. My client wants her son back. That is all. He sat. The judge turned to Rhodes. Respondent? Rhodes rose, calmly placing a thick binder on the clerk's desk. Your Honor, the petitioner has offered statements. We offer facts. The clerk handed the judge the first document after marking it. Exhibit 1, Rhodes said, his voice steady. This is the original temporary custody order granted to Mr. Hayes when the child was 7, due to abandonment by the petitioner. This court issued it. The judge skimmed it, expression tightening. Rhodes placed a second document before the clerk. Exhibit 2, the full custody order granted 2 years later. Mrs. Hayes never appeared, never responded. The clerk stamped and delivered it. The judge flipped through the pages, brows lifting slightly. Exhibit 3, Rhodes continued, placing the school records on the desk. Every meeting for 7 years attended by Mr. Hayes, none by Mrs. Hayes. Exhibit 4, he said, setting down therapy logs. Every session, every signature, all Samuel Hayes. The clerk stamped each set, passing them along efficiently. Vanessa shifted in her seat, confident posture slowly slipping. Then Rhodes said, Exhibit 5. He glanced at Noah. Noah stood without a word and walked forward. The courtroom fell into a hush. He handed Rhodes a small flash drive and a sealed manila envelope. Rhodes gave them to the clerk. The judge nodded. Exhibit 5 admitted. The clerk connected the drive to the courtroom system and pressed play. The video filled the screen. A small, shaky 7-year-old camera view. Vanessa dragging a suitcase across the floor, her voice sharp and final. I'm too young to waste my life caring for a special needs child. You are poor. He's autistic. Both of you are dead weight. He's yours now. Don't contact me, ever. The room went silent. Someone in the gallery whispered, Oh my God! Vanessa's face drained of color. Franklin shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking to his client with growing alarm. The judge turned to the clerk. Open the envelope. The clerk slid it open, removed a piece of folded paper, and handed it to the bailiff, who placed it on the judge's bench. Judge Dalton unfolded it. Samuel knew every word on that page. He had read it 1,000 times in the dark. The judge read it silently, her jaw tightening at each line. When she finished, she looked at Vanessa, eyes cold. Mrs. Hayes, do you care to explain this abandonment note? Vanessa shot to her feet, voice trembling. I wasn't myself. I was overwhelmed. I was a young mother. I made mistakes. Rhodes remained still, watching. Judge Dalton leaned back. Mistakes? You left a 7-year-old child. You left your marriage. You left your responsibilities. And you never attempted to return until your son became financially successful. That's not true, Vanessa cried. I tried to come back. Years ago, he blocked me. Do you have proof of that? The judge asked. Vanessa froze. Franklin placed a hand over his mouth, realizing they were sinking. No, the judge said quietly. Very well. Samuel watched Vanessa crumble, and for a moment, he felt the shadow of the old pain return. But then Noah stepped closer to him, his small hand brushing his father's arm. A silent reminder. They were here together. Judge Dalton closed the file. The petition for full custody is denied. Vanessa gasped. The judge continued, voice firm. Furthermore, due to clear evidence of abandonment, deception, and financial motive. This court rules that the petitioner shall have no legal custody, no physical custody, and no visitation rights. All parental authority remains solely with Mr. Hayes. No, Vanessa whispered. Please, please, he's my son. He is a child you left, the judge replied. Vanessa lunged forward, reaching toward Noah as if she could undo 7 years by stretching out her hand. Noah, please, please don't let them do this. I'm your mother. Baby, look at me. Please, just look at me. Noah lifted his camera, tapped it once, then stepped back behind Samuel. That small movement broke her. She screamed, a raw, splintering sound that echoed off the wooden walls. Please, Samuel, I can change. Don't take him away from me. Please, please, I'm begging you. Samuel didn't move. Noah didn't blink. The bailiff stepped in, guiding her back as she thrashed and sobbed, shouting his name over and over until her voice cracked and she collapsed into quiet, shaking cries. Judge Dalton struck her gavel. Case dismissed. And just like that, the door she walked out of 7 years ago closed forever. Viewers, do you think Vanessa deserves a second chance? Drop your thought in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting and true-to-life stories.